The Game Schooler podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll be talking to game designer and director of fun for Calliope Games Chris Leder. Welcome to the Game Schooler podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. And today we have a very special guest, game designer and director of fun for Calliope Games, Chris Leder. Welcome aboard, Chris.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So, you wear many hats, but I guess the important thing to start with is how'd you get into the hobby, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so, oh boy. I'm going way back. I've been playing games since I was a kid, mostly dice games, Yahtzee, Risk, that kind of thing. I was always a sucker for dice from an early age. And as I got into college, I had friends who were really into Magic the Gathering. I could never quite get into it. It just didn't make sense to me. I'm like, I don't understand. What are you doing with these cards? You're tapping them? What does that mean? I don't get it. But I did have friends who played it a lot. And so we started making little games on the side just for fun. Fast forward a few years when the Game Crafter came onto the scene. Wonderful service right out of Madison there. And I realized I could make professional type games that would feel good. I'd been tinkering with, printing stuff, and I didn't even know about sleeves. Let me tell you how much of a just rube I was. I would take a card that I made on Microsoft Paint.
Gross.
And I would glue gun them or use wonderful glue sticks and stick them to playing cards in order to try to make them shuffle. So when the Game Crafter came on the scene, I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. I can actually make stuff that feels real. So I started designing towards that. They've got components that are like this, so I'm going to design a game like that. They've got dice that do this, I'm going to design a game like that. So I made a lot of games, a lot of really terrible games, but it got me going with the hobby. And the one thing was my wife, who is a wonderful person. She's very supportive, but she's not a gamer. And so she would support in her way. She would play test, but I could tell her eyes would glaze over when I would make like a civilization game, right? So I'm like, I got to make a game that she would want to play. And I went back to my roots, loving dice. And I had this idea once about rolling dice, matching them to cards, and scoring points in order to win. Super simple. Anyone could pick it up and play. And that's where Roll For It came from. I like to tell the story. In order to hook my wife, who loves dogs, I actually made it where you were collecting sets of dogs instead of getting points on the card. And so you would have to get these different. So when I explained to her, I said, Becky, I got this idea. Okay, you roll dice, you match them to the cards. They have dogs on them. You're collecting sets of dogs. And she went, oh, it sounds good, but your ideas are really complex. All right, I'm going to drop the dogs. And that's where Roll For It came from. So I started making it with the Game Crafter. I started selling it on the Game Crafter. And at the time I was working for Best Buy as a manager, and they kind of downsized the management team that I was a part of. So I got a nice severance package. And I got the ability to kind of pursue my dream because I was getting insurance and money, and it was like the perfect time. And Becky said, why don't you go to Gen Con and try to pitch your game? And I think it was her way of being like, get it out of your system.
Sure.
Unfortunately, that's not how it worked out. I made my appointments with people.
It became the system.
Yeah.
Yes. I went and met Ray Weirs at Calliope Games. I'd never met him before. And all roads were leading to that meeting because the local game store that had opened in my downtown area just a few months before, people who frequented that were volunteers at the Calliope booth for years. And they said, you should show this guy Ray. He would really like this. And I was still working at Best Buy at the tail end of this, like kind of finishing out my time. A couple of people in the Geek Squad were big-time gamers, and they had press badges for Gen Con. They said, hey, we can get you a free press badge to go. So it was like all signs were leading to this meeting. And I showed Roll For It to Ray. He immediately saw the potential in it. And he signed it right away. And we started developing it. And as we were developing it over that year or so, he got to know me. He knew that I was out of work at that time. He saw how passionate I was. And I love Calliope's position in the industry because it's really where I came from. Calliope's all about gateway games and filler games, and it's the next step up. If you've played Monopoly and Sorry and Scrabble and Clue, this will help open your eyes to the wider world of games. And that's exactly where I came from. I walked that path. So I love the message of Calliope. So he offered me a job. That was back in 2013, and I've been with Calliope ever since. And it's been a wonderful ride. So that's how I got my start.
Chris, that's awesome.
In a really large nutshell.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure most of the artists today are still using Microsoft Paint for the games.
Well, I want to dig in just a little bit more because I'm always interested when we have a designer on about their background. It just seems to be the hobby has so many different types of people. And so what were you studying in college? What do you love to learn about? What really gets you engaged? And then, kind of talk about where you're at as the director of fun. So Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I have always loved the English language. I was an English major in college, which has really helped in writing rule books and, doing that side of what I do. So communication and English were my two big passions. And I went to college for quite a while. I went through, but I left it because I was a young father and I had a little boy and I needed to take care of him and make money. So I kind of walked away from the college path. But I had gone quite a ways down the English path before I did that. So my thought for a long time was potentially becoming a teacher, and teaching the English language. And I'm happy to see that in today's society, people are really adhering to all of the English language rules that I hold dear. But it's, that's, school was important to me, and I loved school, but I kind of veered off that path in a way I didn't expect to when life called for it. And then this career path of mine, it's a little like I'm Forrest Gumping my way through life a little bit. I didn't expect to go this way. If you'd asked me 20 years ago, I never would have predicted I was going to be a game designer and work in the game industry, but it's certainly something fun. My wife has a government job where she works in the elections department, which this year is lots of fun. So she has like the in the trenches type job. And I have the crazy wacky
chase adventures
job. So but yeah, as the director of fun, I get to wear a lot of hats. And I get to use those English skills quite a bit in coming up with card text, ability text, things like that, and then writing rules. A lot of people hate writing rules. They put it off or even have other people do it. A lot of times when I'm designing, I will start with an idea by actually writing out the rules, and I'll find that's an interesting way to hit walls that I need to break down in a design. As I'm writing the component list, as I'm writing the setup, I start to go, oh, I haven't addressed this aspect of the design yet. I got to do that. And I'll make a note to come back to that. So for me, that's how my brain works. I love writing the rules almost first, not always, but a lot of times I write the rules first when I have a great, or what I think is a great idea. 9 times out of 10, it does not turn out to be a great idea, but I think it's the biggest idea in the world. But if I write it all out, it helps me to kind of wrap my head around it.
Well, it's interesting you say about, thinking about being a teacher. We've had the pleasure of getting several demos over the years from you at the Calliope booth. And I mean, I'll say that you do a fantastic job of doing that and distilling it down into a comprehensive or comprehensible a rule set, and every time we go there, I get an idea exactly how the game works, information I need to walk away, and I guess, and maybe a lot of people don't have that experience of seeing what it is when it's bad, to know how good you are at it, where I can have somebody talk to me for 5 minutes and Michael and I walk away from the booth, I'm like, I have no idea what that game is about. or how any of the mechanism works together.
When Doug gets a bad demo, it's hilarious because I'll just, how you doing? I'm going to keep it moving, head about my day. There's 70,000 other people. Doug is in there for the whole demo and then just kind of gritting through it. I could truly say we've had great demos, though, and your communication, obviously. I guess when you talk about designs, and you said you have about a 10% hit rate, your words, not mine. But when you have, how many designs do you have going at a time? Like Chris, right now, what do you have going for rule books that you've started and drafted, and where are you kind of at as a designer?
Oh goodness! So that's a multi-layered question because I have my designs that I tinker with. I also have designs that I work on for Calliope Games, and I work on those types of things. So there's a little bit of overlap in a lot of ways with that. And sometimes it's funny, where does work end, where does the hobby begin, kind of a thing. So I would say right now, actively, I'm probably working on something like 6 games right now. That's between a couple that we're working on for Calliope and then some different ideas I have. Plus I have wonderful collaborators. And I do want to take a second to recognize one of the greatest, if not the greatest demo artist I've ever met. And that's Ken Franklin, who I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure to meet Ken. He designed the Mansky Caper for us. He's so infectiously fun when you're demoing. He can make any game seem like the most fun game in the world. And so I always emulate what he does, or at least I strive to provide that level of fun. But he's one of my collaborators. So when I talk about these games,
Back to the Future, right? You co-designed that with Ken.
Back to the Future, Dice Through Time, which is hiding out over here. He and Kevin Rogers were my collaborators on that one. We also worked on Flashpoint Legacy of Flame, which is going to be coming out towards the beginning of next year. So I'm working on ideas with them, and so we have different roles that we play, and most of the time my role in our collaboration is to work on the rules and get the rules where they should be. And Ken does a lot of rules work himself. He is a rule book editor as well. So I've got a lot of designs going on. I got a lot of rule books going, but different levels. But I have notebooks full of ideas that haven't become anything. And I've got baggies full of cubes and cards and components that made up some game that I thought of about 4 years ago. And then if I looked at them now, I'd go, what was this game? Something about you're saving the Earth and there's a asteroid, or I don't even remember what this was.
So how does that work? I'm going to steal one of your questions, Michael.
That's my question. Go get it, Doug.
Go.
No, take it. Take it.
So what is it like working for a publisher, but then also submitting designs and doing stuff on the side for other companies? I'm really, I have to use the word blessed. I'm really blessed to have Ray Weirs in my corner. And he understood early on, and this goes back to what I said before. Calliope Games has a specific place in this industry. We are delivering those gateway games, those entry-level games that are a step up from the normal into something bigger. But there's a very specific set of criteria, and I talk to new designers about this when they try to pitch games. The designs have to be 2 to 6 players or 2 to 8 players. We don't do a lot of 2 to 4 player games. We haven't done that in a long time. We don't do 2-player games. We don't do solo games. We really want it to be a game that can get onto a table with a bigger group of people. It has to be designed for an adult but playable by kids. We want the whole family to be there, but it can't be like, the Very Hungry Caterpillar game or something like that, where it's the one. We don't want to be the game that when a kid says, I want to play this, the parent rolls their eyes and they go, all right, play it because you like it. It's got to be something where you play a game and you bring the kids up into your world to play, and it's not overwhelming for them. So we have that going at Calliope. And if a design comes in that doesn't fit that, I'm very helpful and try to be helpful with any designer and say this isn't going to work for us, but I hope that you can find a good home for it. Ray has been really good for me personally as a designer to say,
if you show me the design first, or you have an idea, let me have first crack at it. If it's not for Calliope, though, please feel free to show it to who you want. Get out there. Or if someone offers a game to us, as long as I kind of clear it with him, hey, I'm working on this. Because the other thing is I can't take too much of my bandwidth away from what I'm doing with Calliope Games.
Sure.
He's been wonderful about that. So I've had an opportunity to do Flashpoint and Unmatched and all of these different things. I've worked with other publishers from Gray Fox to Ravensburger and a whole bunch of others. And it's allowed me to kind of stretch my legs a little bit as a designer and get out there and have some fun. So it's great. And I know there's a lot of people who say I can't work for somebody else because I work for this publisher. I'm really, really lucky that I get to freelance a little bit outside of my 9-to-5 job.
Well, it probably helps cut down on the grind, of just the staying in one narrow focus. Sometimes you can feel, especially if you're a creative type, it's like, I need to do something a little bit extra or something different. And sometimes if you're just trapped in a job like that, it can feel like the walls are closing in.
Oh,
yeah,
for sure.
And I want to take that question just one step further, if that's all right. You mentioned names and publishing companies, and you've collaborated with several other designers. You've co-designed Unmatched, Cobble and Fog. Have the props here for our listeners watching on YouTube.
Who's your favorite? Who's the worst? No.
Yeah, right, right. No, I'm not. That's later, Doug. That's
okay.
Afterwards. That's
So
for our
real geek talk a little bit later.
Our fake Patreon that doesn't exist. And back to the future of the dice game. What's it like to collaborate and co-design versus when you are the master of your own ship and to design just you? Well, can you talk to us and tell our listeners about the differences?
Yeah, so there's definitely something very exciting about being the only designer of a game when it comes out. You have full ownership of it, and you feel like, that's my baby, It's wonderful. What I like to say is, though, a lot of those babies won't even exist without more people to help bring them into the world. So if I had this wonderful idea about a city building game, but I hit a brick wall, the way my brain works is it'll try to work on it, but after a while it's going to move on. It's going to be like, yeah, couldn't solve that. I'm going to have to just think of something else, and hopefully I'll come back to it. That's if I'm designing solo. But if I've got collaborators, I can call up Ken and Kevin and I can say, all right, city building game, I can't get past this thing. And we will have the most wonderful conversation. And we'll come up with 8 bad ideas, and then we'll come up with one really cool idea that we riff off of each other, and we come up with these amazing solutions to these problems that just one of us could not have done. It takes that alchemy to create it. So I love collaboration. I adore it. I look forward to it. I think it's great, and it's a little like improvisation. I did theater when I was younger, and I loved going up on stage and doing like whose line is it anyway type, improv stuff. The yes and listening to others and taking their idea and then moving one step further with it and leaving the word no out of it. It's a wonderful space to be in as those ideas are flying around. And we've done that a ton throughout all of these projects that we've worked on, from Unmatched through Back to the Future and Flashpoint, all these other things. There's moments where you have that light bulb. And the other part about it is, if you have that light bulb with a couple of other people, you share that moment. And if the game comes out and people talk about that moment, they talk about that design piece, you share it with those people versus you just thinking in your head, yeah, I remember when I thought of that. I'll give you an example of that is in Back to the Future, we have a mechanism where you can put dice in the past and you ripple them forward in time. The idea for that was just off the cuff. I said, what if you could ripple these dice? And they said, ripple the dice. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? And now when people talk about that, and a lot of people point to that as one of the most interesting things about the game, I can think of those conversations. I can think of those times with those people where we solved those issues and got to that point, and it makes it deeper and richer of an experience because we did it together.
That's awesome. So I don't want to. Let's go negative first. What's the worst part about being a designer? And then we'll go to the best. But what's the worst part of?
Other than being chased around by fanboys at trade shows.
Yeah, it's when you have to do podcasts. Oh,
I know. The worst.
It's just the worst. No. So what I would say is there's a moment where as a designer, you have to hand the project over to the publisher. And it's a little bit of a leap of faith. I mean, obviously they're footing the bill. They gave the green light. They pretty much own the fact that this thing's going to exist. But when you hand it over, you have an idea in your mind of what this thing is going to look like at the end. And you don't have full control over it getting to that point. So I've had games that were published that, for one reason or another, and I'll preface this by saying I think that people always have the best of intentions. No one means to let a game down. But just from some of the production or some of the decisions about art getting in the way of the flow of the game or whatever it might be, when your game comes out and the heart of it is strong, but the execution was a little bit let down in the production process, in the final steps, that's tough as a designer because you're like, I wanted this to work out. So, and I won't name any of that stuff. And I've never felt ashamed of a game I put out there. I don't want to put it like that. But I will say there's times where I feel like if certain other decisions were made, what we had in mind would have come to life more fully on the table and in a way that would have been more embraced by the world. So I think that's the tough thing. You can put your heart and soul into a design, but you don't have full control over what it's going to be like when it hits the table. And that
sounds heartbreaking.
Well,
like you put thousands of hours into it. You know exactly what it's going to look like, and you get that whatever they call the final, but you get that copy. And the production copy. You open it up, and it's not what you wanted it to be. It sounds like I don't have much of a temper. If I do, it's buried very deeply. But I would flip the table. I'd be going wild. My kids would be like, "Oh, Dad didn't get his way about something over there."
Yeah, right. Well, so going back to what I said earlier about being an English major and being all about the grammar and rules and writing that stuff. The most difficult thing for me is if I see the final game and we didn't get a chance to help proof at the very end, and there's spelling or grammar errors, and this has happened. One of our names was misspelled on the box, and that's heartbreaking right there. Otherwise, it's just sort of I wouldn't have gone that way. It's not the end of the world, but I wouldn't have gone that way. But that's why now when we kind of get entrenched in this process, we try to let the publisher know, listen, we're going to be a bit of a pain in the ass at the end, but we would love to get when you get the proofs, the final moment before you sign off and say go to print, can we get one last shot at seeing this thing? We'd love to be involved in the process every step of the way, but is it okay if we get one last shot? Because hey, you're talking about 3 more sets of eyes. They always say, the more eyes on something, the better it is you'll catch things. And in this case, I think it's very true. And we have caught a lot of things in that last glimpse. So
middle managers have to make their money too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we know we're pains in the butt. So,
but that's important when you're trying to, when Michael and I always talk about on the podcast, when there's 3,500 to 5,000 games coming out every year, and you're putting your baby out there and you want to send it out in the best possible light to get noticed, so it doesn't just go off the pier and sink into the lake.
You don't want to send your kid to the first
important.
day of school with a big black eye and have the community wondering why they have a big black eye, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, oh man.
So what's the best part about designing?
Yeah.
Best part about designing is when you get to make a game about your dream IP, and then the director and producer of the movie it was based on actually send you letters saying that they appreciated your game.
Oh,
That was my Back to the Future moment. More
I thought it was going to
broadly,
be one of the characters from Cobble and Fog.
that was so. Let me tell. I'll tell the story. This story stands for a lot of what I think about designing. Kevin Rogers and I used to play Epic Duels, designed by Rob Daviau and Craig Van Ness, I think. Back in the day, the Star Wars game. We used to love that game. We made up fake characters for it. Not fake characters. We'd make like Superman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Spider-Man. We put them in. We made our own decks of cards. We played that game. We did tournaments. And this was before either of us were really gamers. We just loved that game. And when the opportunity came, when Unmatched was announced, I was lucky enough to know Rob Daviau at that point because we'd worked together on a project for Calliope. And I said, if I could, yes, there it is, Ship Shape. Fantastic. I said, Rob, if I can help play test this in any way, I'd love to. And he said, oh, sure, yeah, we'll get you the set, So we got prototype stuff and tried the thing out. And we gave a lot of good feedback. And we were so passionate that he came to me at Origins one year and said, hey, would you want to work on a set for Unmatched? We have this set that's Victorian with the Invisible Man and Sherlock Holmes, these different people.
It's an awesome set.
We have some changeover with staff, and we don't quite have someone to work on that. And I was shaking inside, like, this is full circle moment right here. Because
yes, please.
Epic Duels now coming back and Unmatched, and this guy who I really do admire as a designer is asking me to make this set. And so I couldn't say no. And when I told Kevin about it, he said, this is going to be amazing. And we actually did that together. And unfortunately, because of the way I said yes, it wasn't the two of us signing. I didn't think I had the power at that moment. So I signed it and it gave him 50% of everything I made. But we ended up, they were so nice. Justin and Rob added him to BGG as a designer, and they made sure that he got the credit he deserved for it. So that was really good. And then we ended up doing Battle of Legends Volume 2 as well. So that was the best part about being a designer, is those opportunities to make those games that you're going to love and that other people are going to love. When you're playing one of those designs, something that you created, and you go, holy cow, this is really cool, and people are going to just geek out about this. And we had that moment quite a bit with the Unmatched series and everything else we've done. So that's the best part. Is it's kind of like when you're a parent and you see your kid and you're like, man, that kid is pretty awesome. That kid's doing some amazing stuff. You just feel a sense of pride. It's something that you created, but then it took on a life of its own. And as a designer, if you can get to that point, it's amazing.
That's awesome. And so what, you got a letter from Robert Zemeckis? Is that?
Yes. So
that's awesome.
We got a letter from Robert Zemeckis, and we got a letter from Bob Gale. So
wow.
Robert Zemeckis's was very much like his office sends out a form letter to people who do things. It was like,
Sure.
Thank you for putting out a product in the Back to the Future universe. It's wonderful that it's continuing. I mean, but still, it was like signed, and we were like, woohoo! But the Bob Gale one, he's like the caretaker of the Back to the Future series. He's always there for everything. He's there for when the Broadway show opened. He's there all the time. He really kind of maintains the sanctity of that whole world. His letter was way more specific. Like, this is great. Games with Back to the Future have not been very good in the past. I'm so glad that you made one that really feels part of the trilogy and everything. And yeah, so I have those in frames, and those are really special to me.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we're both Back to the Future fanboys.
Same clock tower.
The heartbreaking thing was that game came out in freaking 2020.
Yeah.
And if the world had not shut down, and if Gen Con had happened, and if COVID wasn't a thing, Ravensburger had booked a DeLorean, like a floating DeLorean that people would have taken pictures with, that would have sat outside the main doors of the building. And they were actually doing something where you could get like a signed copy of the game and a picture with the car, and it was like a deal. So I was just exploding. I was like, this is amazing. Mandalorian. I'm so excited. And of course, it didn't quite work out that way.
Well, after the Lorcana 2023 fest that all three of us were a part of, maybe they should bring back the DeLorean, right? It could be 4 years later. You could bring back the DeLorean and you can offer that same event again.
I would be very happy with that. That's okay. You hear that, Ravensburger? Make it happen.
So what exactly does a director of fun do? Your title for Calliope Games is a director of fun. So what does that job actually entail?
Can I take a guess before you answer the question? I'm going to
Willy
guess
Wonka
that
style?
you wake up at like 4 a.m. because you have to get the most out of your day. Am I right or not right? I'll just turn it over to you. Go ahead.
You were both right. I have to put on my Willy Wonka hat with my cane. I have to lick the wallpaper, dance around for a while. I have to talk about pure imagination, and then, squeeze every drop of fun out of the day. Director of fun is it's a really wide utility player who does just about anything that needs doing, whether that's writing rule books or creating cards or answering customer service emails or setting up conventions or running booths or demoing games or doing play nights or whatever it is. I'm kind of the catch-all for everything. So lately my job really has been game development. So it's been ushering the games to where they need to be to get on the shelf. But it's really wearing whatever hat I need to get done what needs to be done. We're a small company, so Ray handles so much of the high-level logistics stuff and all that, and Michelle is working on the money side of things and orders and all of the paperwork and all of that. We're a very small team, so we learn skills that we need and we use them. Ken Franklin is actually our senior yeoman, as he describes it. He's the old guy that gets stuff done. So Ken is a doctor. He actually is in clinic Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So
a real doctor. A real doctor.
Not a fake one.
Not a fake doctor. No interdisciplinary leadership there. Real doctor to our listeners keeping score at home. Back to you, Chris.
That's okay. Well, if they say there's a doctor in the house, you both can say yes, there is.
No. I never answer yes to that.
Yeah.
No.
Michael has saved so many people on airplanes from heart attacks. You wouldn't believe it.
My father may have said yes to that with how confident he was, but I was not. No. I stay quiet when that gets asked. Back to you.
Yes. But Ken, despite working so hard and doing all of the important stuff, he comes on and he builds tabletop simulator mods so that we can play test the games across. Ray's in North Carolina, I'm in Illinois, he's in Michigan. Our art director used to be in Scotland. We can get together with people and play test our games. And so we will all wear whatever hats we need to. As the director of fun, I just consider it my charge to, make sure that people are experiencing the fun of Calliope Games and getting it out into the world.
Yeah, and what I heard you say there, Chris, what was so interesting, which I think is the quote we'll need to lead with when we tweet out this special episode, the director of fun writes rule books. I think that's how you started the answer, which is it's we've talked about that a few times here in the episode, and this is not something that I prepped for in researching it, but what do you look for, or what stands out to you when you read a rule book and you're like, oh, that's good, or oh, that was smart? What's one thing that you've noticed lately in a game that you've covered that really struck you as a fan of rule books? And Doug and I are both fans of rule books, and maybe this will get edited out because maybe we're nerding out too much on the written word. Go get it, Chris.
So, how do we start the most fun rule book segment ever in a podcast?
Impossible. It can't be done.
We could bullet point it maybe a little bit, right? So brevity, I think, is important. So I'm going to talk from a place of where Calliope lives. Now, I know that there's people who are making deep strategy games that need to be 37 pages long, like the old Fantasy Flight rule books where it was a tome, and then also they needed a rata and a compendium afterwards. But for me, a rule book has to have brevities. It's got to be not too long. I think that visual examples are always good. I think it's also important that you have a component sheet that shows the different things. one thing that frustrates the heck out of me is when there's a lot of different types of cards in a game, and all it is a list of cards, but it doesn't show you what those cards look like, especially
the
if they have
backs
the
of
same
them.
counts. If there's 30 of this type of card and 30 of this type of card and 30 of this type of card, but the backs don't say what they are, and you're like, I guess this is this one? I don't know. But I think, and then I think tiebreaker rules. You got to have a tiebreaker rule. I can't believe it when people have to go to BGG to find out what happens in a case of a tie. To me, that's always like, come on, that's rule book 101. You got to have a tiebreaker rule.
Michael and I hug all the time when we tie.
Yeah.
We enjoy it. We embrace our shared victory.
So what you're
Never.
saying is
It gets logged as a win for me.
in case of a tie, call Michael and Doug at this number and ask them to hug.
Yes.
No. I do
race
not
over
give
to his
consent
house.
for that. In case of a tie, I log it as a victory in BGG. Case closed.
Boom. I will say my favorite kind of clever tiebreaker rule was in a game we made called Spy Master, designed by Seth Johnson, but we needed a good tiebreaker rule for it. And I came up with this idea, because you're spies, it's like a cyber hacky spy type thing. It said, in case of a tie, because there's also a I pick, you choose type of thing, and then you can get the Spy Master card as part of one of the groups. It says, in case of a tie, the player with the Spy Master card wins. But it doesn't say the tied player with the Spy Master card. It says, if there is a tie, the player with the Spy Master card wins. So you could be falling so far behind, but you're going, they might tie. I'm going to take the
Better
pile
hold
of
on to this.
Spy Master just in case. I thought that was a really fun, unique way to do the tie rule. So that
Keeps
was
everybody
that was
engaged, too.
fun.
So, what is one thing that outsiders or muggles would be surprised to know about being a designer or a publisher? Like something that doesn't get talked about that you wish either people knew, or you see stuff on Board Game Geek and you're like, guys, everybody complains about this, but that is 100% not feasible.
Oh, I can tell you that. What I would say is, don't get everyone to sign NDAs. No one's looking to steal your design. No one's going to do so. There will be a lot of new folks who show up on the scene and say, I've designed this game. How do I protect it? Do I get everyone to sign like a non-disclosure agreement, or do I limit who I play test it with, or how do I do that? And I'm so fast to say there's no new ideas out there. It's all just iterations on the same ideas. It's the same with fiction and everything else, right? Unless you have a clever mechanical patentable thing, you don't worry about it, because really you need to be play testing that game with everybody, not your friends and family. Complete strangers. You need to put the game in front of them with a rule book, step back and say, can you read this rule book, set this game up and play it without me telling you anything about it? So I've always said playtesting is the most important thing in the world. You playtest, and then when you're done playtesting, you playtest some more, so you can fail faster. You can find out what the problems are. But if you're worried about someone who is testing your game, turning around and stealing it, you are doing yourself a disservice. You really just have to get out there and test the thing. And if you document it with photos and things, and you've got logs of what people said, you have a record that you had this idea. But it happens so rarely that people have to defend an idea, or sometimes it's even an idea will pop up somewhere and they'll say, oh, this felt like it was stolen from me, and that person may have tested my game, but really the ideas aren't that similar. It's not the same thing. So
Well, the amount of work that goes into making a game from prototype to finished production is not something that you're like, oh, that's a great idea. Next week I'll be publishing this game.
right.
Like that
Yes.
doesn't exist. So the idea that somebody would immediately steal it and then go through all that effort and then put it out
It's
is
just not,
kind of
it's not,
comical.
It's not going to happen. And I always try to tell people, don't sweat that. Make the game, test the game, have fun, get it out there. If you bring it to a convention and you're showing it to people and it's good, it'll get buzz, and people won't be trying to steal it. They'll be saying, I can't wait until that thing gets published. I want to play a final version of that. So
Yeah.
that's a big piece of advice I always give people. Besides, level 1 is playtest, playtest, playtest. Level 2 is don't worry about people stealing your game while you're playtesting.
Cool. We got a chance to play the Patrician Towers of
Yes.
Influence at ACD, and I know that that's exclusively in Barnes & Noble right now, going to be going to Kickstarter backers, maybe?
Oh, Kickstarter backers have their copies.
Okay, cool.
It's in Barnes & Noble, and then in the fall, it will be out in retail and all over the place.
So can you tell us more about that awesome game and how it came together?
Yeah, so Michael Schacht is the designer of that game, and it came out back in the early aughts. And it was
1908.
a hit. Yeah, it's a light Euro strategy game, and it did very well overseas, but in America it didn't really take off all that well. It was published here by Mayfair, and Ray Weirs was working with Mayfair for a while, and he loved that game. There were a couple of games he loved from those Mayfair days. One was Station Master, and one was Patrician. Both of those games, he said, if ever I was able to get my hands on those, I'd love to bring those games back with a new and better look and kind of a sharper rule set. And he's managed to do both of those. So, and both of them were amazing. I'm really happy with those. And Patrician, Towers of Influence, we didn't change a ton. We discussed everything when it came to this. We said, are we going to go the whole restoration games route, where we're going to redo all the art and rewrite the rules and change everything up? And we actually went down some paths that way to see. But we kept saying, we're doing a lot of work to reinvent the wheel here. You know, what if we don't do that? What if we kind of keep it similar, tidy up the art a little bit? There were some web-only expansions that were released for it back in the day. What if we created those as full modules for this and included them in the box and made it a whole complete experience? And I'm glad we did it that way, because some people have a lot of memories of the old one and they really like it, and that brings them into that. And I think it's just a really sharp-looking game. Ray always wanted it to be a companion piece to Suro, as far as being kind of a beautiful overall presentation, and they could sit next to each other's kind of classic look. So Patrician is everybody, knock on wood, everybody who's been playing it has really been enjoying it, and I think they're surprised because it's so simple to play. It doesn't look like it would be, but I mean, it's so simple to, I'm going to play a card, I'm going to put a tower and stack it on top of another tower, I'm going to take the card from that city, then I'm going to replenish it, that's my whole turn. It's so fast, but there's so much strategy in programming how your turns are going to go. And it took me by surprise, because the first time I played it, I thought, this seems a little dry. I don't know about this one. But I played it again, and I went, oh, I wasn't bringing my brain to this game.
Yeah.
I see. It's not just stuff happening. You need to choose where you're going to build those towers. The two sides of it, the area control and the set collection, and you need to put some thought into it. But it's approachable for even kids to play. So I've really enjoyed bringing that back to market.
Yeah, my memory of that game is Doug and I are pretty good about a demo is a demo. We're not going to sit down and play the whole game because there are other people that want to play. So you did a rules teach. I feel like we had a table full of 5, but maybe there were just 4 of us.
I think 4.
It was like a couple on the other side of the table, and we got through the first round. We played a whole game. The 4 of us did not leave that table. That is the only whole game that we played that night, and a night where I think I played demoed 14 or 15 games. Patrician was the one that we played all the way through, I think, unless we just played to the midway point. But
and it has
great.
Go ahead. It has an elegance of a different design time, in the best possible way. And in a world where there's Kickstarters with 8 million expansions and modules and deluxeified this and deluxeified that, to the point where sometimes we play these games and it's like, there's so much stuff. And this one, right after Michael and I played it, we're like, this reminds us of all of the classic Euro games. And I think we had just done an episode on our high five Euro games like a week before that. And it was like, yeah, these are like those classic games from that time period that, some people might say, oh, that's dry, but they work. They work because they're not cluttered.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry to jump in there. The other thing, in episode 156, we did Zularetto as our game of the week. Same designer, similar time period. It might even be a little bit older. But what I loved about Patrician and what reminded me of Zularetto is you're going to get a bonus, but which bonus do you choose? You're not going to get all of the bonuses. Yes. Right? This isn't Dead Reckoning where it's the first one to get 6 bonuses. No, in the next 20 to 30 minutes, you're going to get 2 to 3 bonuses, but you better choose wisely and you better push people out of the other ones in a way that didn't feel mean. It's one that I'm looking forward to my family trying out because it plays up to 5. My 8-year-old will probably team up and be sitting, right next to my hip, and we'll go through it together. But I do think it had a similar feel to Azul for me. And again, I played one game, it was demo. We haven't done a full review or breakdown, but just seeing it where it's like, oh, I could see really spending some time in this game and trying to recruit other players, because I think, if all you need are 1 or 2 others to really get it, and that seems like a game that could get to the table a lot. So,
yeah, I appreciate that. And it's also for us, for Calliope, it skews more gamer than family than we're used to. A lot of our games tend to skew the other way. So I think this one could take a lot of people by surprise because they think of Calliope as maybe Roll Forward and Hive Mind and Suro, but it's not anything that's going to challenge their mind a lot. But with Patrician, not that it's a brain burner, but it does have strategic elements that are deeper than you'd think. And if you're playing with people who play Euro games, they're gonna immediately see how it can be very cutthroat in terms of what you take and how you take away from others. And if you're watching, oh, you've taken those Patrician cards, so I'm going to start to take those, so you can't build sets with those. All those layers are there, and I'm excited by the reception we're getting from gamers because, a lot of times we get kind of dismissed a little bit just because we are a more broad-based audience in our games. So it's been interesting to see as gamers are finding Patrician, they're really falling in love with it.
Well, it's a perfect combination of having something that's easy to play that, like Michael said, and his 8-year-old would probably be able to handle it right away of playing the basic concepts of what you're doing. And then the more you play it, the more you're going to pick up the nuance of the strategy, which is, to me, is the ultimate, evolution of what Calliope is, with that idea of going from one step to the next and scaffolding and laddering players up. I can't think of a better version of, what I'm doing on a turn is so simple. I got 1 or 2 things and it's easy to do, but then playing it over and over again, and then once you start to see that depth, I think you're focusing and narrowing in on concepts that are much larger and much more gamery, if you can use that word, to branch out into other things, which is really cool.
Well, and it was a game that we walked away from the table, and the first thing I thought is, I hope that game does well, because I want that game to stick around. I want other people to play that game. And when you have 3,500 games coming out a year, sometimes games fall under the radar, or they might not, get in. You know what I mean? I hope that one does well for you guys, because I hope it's in friends and families' living room and houses, because selfishly, I want to be able to play that game with other people. So,
well, I'll say this about that. We have a philosophy where a game can't become an evergreen and can't become a classic unless it's been around for 10 years. So Suro is past that point. Roll Forward's just reaching that point. In fact, it just hit its anniversary. We don't give up on a game after one print run. We won't say, that was a tank, it didn't do anything, let's move on to something else. So a game like Shipshape took off really big when it first came out. It had a couple of different printings. It's settled down, but I think Shipshape is one where everybody should be playing that game. Everybody should be aware of that game. It's a fun spatial puzzle stacking. I mean, it's just a toyetic factor that's a lot of fun. We won't let those games go. They're going to stay in our catalog, and we're going to keep working. And you just never know. Sometimes a game takes a couple of years, and then what happens is people discover it and go, "Oh, this is a great new game." And then they go, "Oh, this game's been out for 2 years. I didn't know." But if enough people start talking about it, it becomes new to those people. That doesn't happen all the time, and it's not necessarily going to happen with all of our games. But we do hold out the hope that some of our titles that we know are really strong will have legs in the long run. And I think that we'll keep going with the ones that are big hits with everybody, and we're going to keep pushing for those ones that like Patrician. We want to make sure people see it and play it. Enchanted Plumes is a card game that we have that is like that, where it just continues to build up and up and up, and it hits people's greatest lists and things like that. Recently, someone asked on one of the message boards about, hey, what are some games that fell through the cracks? And I said, Enchanted Plumes. The amount of conversation that blossomed from that little comment, I couldn't believe, because I went through all the other 200 posts, and people would thumbs up things or say yeah, this is a good idea. But Enchanted Plumes, it was people coming out of the woodwork saying, oh my gosh, I tell everybody about this game. You got to play this game. And maybe that says something about our marketing team. We just have to make sure that we're pushing harder from the get-go. But I don't mind the idea that those games are getting ingrained in people's minds over the years, so that hopefully they'll stick around and become long-lasting.
So talk about that last one for a minute, because it's one that Doug and I have played, and I enjoy. I think you do too as well, Doug. But tell our listeners about the peacocks and the feathers and the set collection, the building the pyramid. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Enchanted Plumes, it's Brendan Hansen, and it's a small little card game, but it's got these beautiful feathers that you use to make up these plumes. It's a card-playing game. It's got kind of classic feel to it, but there's a fun trick. As you make a peacock plume of these different colors, the top row, you can do different colors up there, and all cards have a point value. The cards you play in the top row are going to count as negative points towards you. So what you have to do is build your top row and then start tapering it down like a plume would be. But as you go down to the next level, you can only use cards of the colors included in the row above. So if I use blue and red and yellow and green, I can only use those colors. I'm excluded from using others. And you can only move downwards, so you'll start to get tighter and tighter. And you don't know if those cards are going to come up in the train of cards you can take that's in the middle of the table. So you're building your plume. The top row values are negative, but everything under is positive. So you want to try to get low-valued cards at the top, taper them down with high-valued cards, and then in the end, when you get down to one card, you play that one face down, and it's like the head of the peacock. So now you have this beautiful peacock, and you can make multiple plumes. You can make one giant one to try to get a lot of points, or you can make lots of little ones. But there's a whole thing where when you take cards, you can draw blind off the top of the deck, or you can swap with the train of cards that's in the middle of the table. But when you swap, you might be putting a card in there that's exactly what somebody else needs. You just don't know. So there's so many little strategic, fun elements to the game. It's the only negative about it is if people like to spread those plumes out big, it could be a bit of a table hog. But other than that, the actual play of it is outstanding. It's just when we first got shown that, we couldn't believe how fun of a game it was, and we kind of went all out trying to make the art beautiful. And
it is.
It's gorgeous.
It's a little pocket-sized card game you could take anywhere. It's great. So Enchanted Plumes I'd say it's for everybody.
That's one I got to get in my quiver that I keep with what's the Santa's one? 12 days. I keep that in there as well. That's
and I'll
always...
give you a little secret.
Uh-oh.
We're working on a companion to 12 Days that's called 12 Nights.
Ooh.
Knights. And it's centered around Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and it's got a tapestry feel to it. So
nice.
12 Days is fantastic. It's got a wonderful holiday feel to it. And we'll have 12 Nights as well, which is
to play all year long.
You can play all year long. It has just a slight different change to the rule set, just so it's not exactly the same game, but it really has a similar feel to it. But again, a game you can put in your pocket and take anywhere.
So what else is coming up from Calliope Games that you can share that's not under NDA and embargo?
No. So we did a project years and years ago called the Titan series, where we gathered a whole bunch of great designers and had them make games in the Calliope way, kind of like those criteria we talked about earlier. So we've gotten wonderful games out of that. Shipshape was one of them. Hive Mind was another. Ancestry by Eric Lang. Lots of different great games. So we've only got a couple left to make because this was a multi-year project where we delivered multiples. And the last few are taking a little longer. We've got one called Day of the Brambles by Peggy Brown. That one is it's like a schlocky sci-fi B-movie vibe where there's these bramble alien things that are taking over a small town, and then the players have to, one player is the brambles. The other players are local heroes like, the teen and the sheriff and a professor, and it's a card flinging game. So the locations are out on the table, and the bramble players trying to cover them up, and then the people are throwing little weapons that cover those things up, so you're just dicing, and really it's just throwing cards all over the place. It's a lot of fun. It's a light little game. That's a wonderful, fun little project. We are in good shape with that. The other one, and this is the biggest project I've ever been a part of, Calliope or otherwise, is a 2-game set called Legends of the Monster Academy, or we just call it Monster Academy. This was a book series that was written by Matt Forbeck. He did a trilogy of these books about these monster kids living in a school which is basically a prison because the city around them, this kingdom around them, doesn't want monsters running around. So they've built this school to sort of keep the kids, where they are. And the kids have adventures and go off and do things. The books are really fun, and that's the basis of this. The other designer on this is Mike Selinker. He was the other Titan. He's a puzzle maker extraordinaire, and he makes great card games. So the Monster Academy is, like I said, 2-game set. It's a chapter-based game where you play your cards cooperatively in order to fight these hazards that are in the school in order to perform different things you need for the different chapters. So every student, every player is a student who has unique powers, and you play cards to get out there. And it's got a really cool thing where you choose your approach. You might choose to be wise or caring or brave or strong. And when you choose that, you kind of set yourself for the round, and that tells you what types of cards that you can play, what bonuses that you're going to get. And that's how you're choosing to approach these hazards that are out there. And the idea is maybe there's a little bit of storytelling that goes on, a little light RPG element where you talk about, I'm this character, I can turn into a dragon, I'm going to go and approach this person and breathe some fire, and the other person says, okay, well, I'm going to come over to this other person, I'm going to see if I can talk them out of doing what they're doing. So there's kind of a fun storytelling element, but it's really about cooperating and taking these things out, and it's all chapter based. So there's two boxes. One is the kids at the school dealing with some shenanigans, and then the second one branches out of the school with the teachers involved as well, because the entire kingdom is now threatened. So that project has been in the works now for quite a while, and we're finally getting it to a point where we're playtesting it with people. They're really enjoying it. We've got some rough edges that we're working on. It's taking longer than we wanted it to, but I think the end product is going to be really, really fun. And so that's one of the things this weekend. We've got people coming over. We're going to be testing out some different things, but it says a lot. It's like I feel like I'm married to this project a little bit. Some days I love it, and some days I'm shaking my fist at it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I do.
But
so, Chris.
Sorry. I just want to say it's been a great opportunity to work with some amazing people, and it's also been a great opportunity to grow as a designer as we've gone through this process.
Awesome. And we appreciate you coming on the podcast. And anytime we have an interview, we have a standard question that we ask everybody that comes on. and I'm really looking forward to your answer here. What's awesome with gaming?
What's awesome with gaming?
Or about gaming?
Well, to me, it's sharing experiences. I know that sounds like a mission statement, but I've been a fan of a lot of different things in my life, whether it's movies or TV shows or sports, whatever. But to me, the shared experience of sitting around a table and cheering or crying or just experiencing something together that no other group will ever experience, to me, that's awesome. When I played Pandemic Legacy Season 1 for the first time, and there's a huge plot twist, and it turned out I was the bad guy, and I didn't know it, and I stood up from the table, and I threw my hands up, and the whole table erupted in, like, cheers, and it was, like, amazing. That's something that no other form of entertainment I've ever experienced has been able to give me. So for me, gaming is it's a shared thing. It's building memories and experiences together, and I absolutely love it.
That is a great answer. Yeah, you're 100% right. The amount of times and points that I can pinpoint in my gaming life and go, oh yeah, remember when that happened? Remember when we did that? We had the one game, and it doesn't, sometimes it's not even, sometimes it's like, I rolled 10 20s in a row or whatever, and other times it's like, remember when every time I tried something it failed and we all laughed the entire time? All of those stories and experiences are really special in the way that you can look back. And I even remember one time I was at a convention getting a demo of Dicey Peaks from you guys, and I sat down at the table, and I don't know if it was you or Ray was giving me the spiel of how the game goes, and I said, I don't know, what are you looking for at the top, the Yeti, or are you, what's at the top?
Red flag. The red flag.
The red flag. And he sits down and he goes, one of these up here is the red flag, and I go, it's that one. And then we played the game out, and then it was that flag, and it was so awesome. And I was just being a smart aleck when I was doing it, but
no,
yeah, that would never happen. But the memory of that, and then just a simple thing of that experience, and I've tried it playing it with my daughter and doing that exact move over again. It's never happened again. But to kind of pinpoint yourself and put yourself back in the time and have those shared experiences is really cool. So we appreciate you spending so much time with us, Chris. It means a lot to us, and we really appreciate what you and Calliope are doing with your I know one of the things that you have is the games are all ready to go right out of the box. You don't have to punch stuff out, and the higher player counts, unless you've, part of the Waltons or something like that. Most families of 5 or 6 can play those games. And so I really appreciate what you guys are doing, and certainly fits into what our audience appreciates in gaming, and making those experiences, playing with families and getting families all together instead of this is Dad's game night and we're going to do that. So keep up the good work. Thanks for spending the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to come out and chat with you guys. This was wonderful.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us this week. Thank you again, Chris, for spending some time with us. And thank you, listeners, for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.